Hey, 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 good morning, buenos dias, Center for Spiritual Living Palm Desert and friends all over the world. So grateful to be with you. It's Rev Charles Hall and my man, Jeffon, and we are here with chapter 17 of our book. 17 weeks we've been into this book.
Wow.
And we're so very grateful to be with you on this lovely Tuesday morning. It's raining hard here in the Seattle area as I'm on my working vacation here. I haven't seen rain in quite some time. So even up here, this is the first day I've seen rain in quite a while. It's been sunny and it's good. And it's election day in our country. And I think it's a tremendous opportunity for us to not necessarily dive down the political rabbit hole or the election rabbit hole this morning, but just to remind all of us how important it is to keep our thoughts and our awareness high. Just be vigilant for our country and, make sure you vote and to keep our thoughts high, that there's certainly if you have any sort of awareness of what's going on, which I know most of us do because we're conscious people, we know that there's some divisiveness happening and a lot of questions and I was thinking too about our ballot in Riverside County. It was, almost 3.5 pages. I'd never seen one that was so, front, back, and then some on the back of the second page. And it occurred to me, we've got a presidential election going on, but a lot of local issues as well.
Right.
And, that's where a lot of powerful governing happens is at the local level. How are you feeling on election day? What's going on with you, my friend?
Yeah, I think that there's a collective anxiousness that I've tapped into off and on over the course of, just the last few days. This kind of approach of committed detachment, so committed to making a difference, committed to seeing what I'm envisioning to continue to unfold, but also detached from it unfolding exactly that way. As Reverend Lori and I were talking prior to jumping on, knowing at a deep level that it's unfolding always in a harmonious manner, though harmony at times may seem to be lacking. And to really just recognize that perhaps that which I am seeking in the world or something to shift or change, maybe that's not actually what I'm seeking. Perhaps what I'm actually seeking is the seeker within that enables me to actually go out on these ventures of trying to grasp something out there. So really turning my awareness, my attention inward and beginning to recognize why there are certain things that will bring these uncomfortable feelings or feeling as if I want to shield myself from hearing what this person says or what that person says, and really look within myself and ask, why is that taking place? And what are the barriers that I've continuously built up within myself that prevents me from standing on this principle of oneness or even divine order?
Mm-hmm. And the author speaks about that in here too, toward the end of the
Rev Charles.
Yep.
I could. Okay. Maybe the sound broke out on my end, but I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Apologize, gang. Yeah, I've got good internet here. I'm not. Can you hear me right now?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's one of the things that I love the author brings up, and I know we're going to get into it. You're going to take us on the adventure of the chapter here. But just the idea of being exposed to something that makes us uncomfortable, that either we will decide to chew on or not, as far as just growth and and stepping out of our bubble and our shield to just be willing to be exposed by new ideas and see what happens out of that. So are you ready to dive in, my brother?
Yeah, one thing I want to say is for those individuals who ever get this magazine, I have and I think it's mentioned in the chats, I had the privilege to write the daily guides, and the one that I don't say like, oh, that I wrote, but the one that was channeled in a way to express it is really aligning with this idea, what am I looking for? What are we looking for? And if we cannot answer this question, then we're like a boat in the middle of the ocean with no direction, at the mercy of external factors like the wind and the waves, waiting to wash up ashore. And when we begin to look deep within ourselves and recognize there is something that is enabling us to go on this venture of seeking, and that energy that enables us to seek is actually that which is all-encompassing from my perspective, in the sense of just divine order, in the sense of infinite intelligence. in the sense of God, or the divine intelligence, whatever you want to call that, which is all encompassing. And perhaps it's a great time, and I had this conversation before I move into this. It's a great time for us to perhaps lean towards some of these things that are less behavioral in nature and more internal in nature. And what I'm talking about is compassion. Compassion obviously can show up in a form of a behavior, but it's something that fundamentally is embodied within. Kindness, deep level of respect and acceptance. Of course, there are behaviors that flow forth from those internal qualities or cognitive skills, but perhaps leaning in that direction of what is taking place internally and be aware of that, particularly if there are certain things that we observe today as we go through the election day or even over the course of the next week or multiple weeks. And if something doesn't fit what you or what I wanted to fit in the external world, not allowing that to actually determine our internal state. I don't know. That's something that I've just really been talking with my wife about, and some of my friends and family. And
we get to choose our life. We determine it, no matter what's happening in the exterior. It's a mindfulness practice.
Right.
It's a mindfulness practice. Were you just reading yourself out of the Science of Mind magazine?
Yeah, I was trying to remember what there's so many.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jeffon Seeley.
This is from Jeffon Seeley.
That's Science of Mind magazine, by the way. Pick it up. Yeah, Jeffon did the daily guides for this month. It's awesome.
Yeah, awesome. What a blessing. What an incredible opportunity. So, with that said, as always, if those who are tuning in, you can share your comments, you can share your thoughts. I know Reverend Charles and I, we enjoy having that type of conversation, not only with one another, but with everybody out there. For those of you who have been with us as we've been exploring this book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, we greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate your willingness to contribute. And those of you who may just be popping on, welcome.
Welcome. Absolutely.
And to the Center for Spiritual Living Palm Desert for your willingness to have this conversation when it's easy to simply say, well, look, George Floyd stuff happened in May. We're past that. We don't need to continue to explore that. For your willingness, CSL Palm Desert, to continue this conversation when, let me just say it honestly, most have not. It's something that goes to show the character and the values and the culture that you all have established and are continuing to establish within the community.
Right on. Absolutely. And, that's what's great too. And I know we're going to get into this, but he brings up Trayvon Martin in here, which is powerful too, from 7 years ago.
Yep.
So it's that got me somehow. He in a way brought it home. So yeah, we're rocking and rolling. We absolutely appreciate your comments, and thank you, Annie, for acknowledging Jeffon. What did she say? It talks about a meditative state. Brought her into a meditative state. She appreciates your contribution this month in the Science of Mind magazine.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie, for participating. All right, here we go.
Let's do it. All right, so I have
no definitions this week.
No definitions. Yeah. Just for the record, everybody who has even listened to one episode, we will all be quizzed on all the definitions at the end. So be prepared for that. All right.
Let's pop quiz it. Yep. Here we go.
So with that, chapter 17, success. So some of you may remember we talked about failure last week in terms of why anti-racist ideas and power doesn't ultimately stick. So I think Rev Charles and I, we mentioned prior to jumping on, this was an important chapter because it's leaning us towards what can we do. So he starts off in this chapter, I think one of the first sentences is an individual who says racism as a disease. Now I'm going to share. Yep. I'm going to share a few things here, and it's just to get our minds kind of thinking about this concept. You do not have to agree with them, but it's just something that perhaps you can grasp and think a little bit more about. Now, the author then, Dr. Kendi, he said, well, isn't racism more like an organ of the body? Isn't racism essential for America to function? Isn't the system of racism essential for America to live? Now, these are concepts that he was asking in the turn, kind of in comparison to racism as a disease. Now, he doesn't say, and I don't say that this is exactly what it is, but it's just some ideas that we can begin to think about and ask, when has racism not been within the system or society of America? He goes on to say, all right, well then, how can anti-racists ask racists to open their minds and change when we are closed-minded and unwilling to change? And this is a great part just to kind of park and ask, how can we ask somebody else to see the world differently if we are unwilling to actually expand the way that we are choosing to see the world? And that's kind of his concept. He was saying, in his terms, he was unwilling to expand his mind, and he was seeing racism through a very small peephole, for lack of a better word. Now, I believe that this next sentence is something that all of us can grasp and embrace and recognize. The story of our generation, this opportunity that we are living right now on the sacred planet, as it is orbiting and spinning in the infinite universe, our story of this generation will be based on what we are willing to do. What we are actually willing to do, not what we think we're going to do, not what we say we're going to do but don't follow through, but what we are actually willing to do. And then he goes on to ask, are we willing to endure the grueling fight? And we can replace fight, if we want to say, the opposition against racist power and policy, and willing to transform the anti-racist power within, and I didn't have enough space, ourselves to bring that into society. So are we actually willing to stand here and ultimately say that I'm willing to confront these racist ideas and policies and policy makers and bring this anti-racist concept that is always available within me out into the forefront to shift the society that I find myself in? And that's from page 217 to 219. But those are all points that are just powerful.
Powerful. And you know, a grueling fight. I know we use certain language and like to couch things a certain way in New Thought, but it's a grueling. You know, I was thinking about another word too, opportunity.
Yeah.
But I think grueling is the word, though. It's heavy lifting. It's actually, and it's individual transformation.
Yes.
That's the empowered part of it, and where the grueling aspect comes, because we do get so entrenched, don't we?
Yeah.
We get entrenched in our worldview because it keeps us comfortable. It's familiar. But to be willing to be changed is a grueling process. You know, I mean, there's stories from sacred scripture about, you know, wrestling with angels and, you know, wrestling. Right. You know, that whole idea of a grueling process of transformation in order to be made new, in order to be freer, more expanded. So it is a grueling process, and I think it's okay to talk about it that way, but knowing that we're equipped with the capacity to win that fight.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that whole concept of the story of our generation will be based on what we are willing to do. It's easy to look back at the 60s or even further back in history at the Emancipation Proclamation and recognize these monumental things that happened that at least open the doorway to more opportunity or perhaps more equality or equity. And in the midst of looking back, at least for myself, sometimes I forget that right now, as you mentioned earlier, Rev Charles, we are in the midst of creating the future and the reality that we will all inhabit and also will be passed down to the emerging generations. So what we are doing in this moment of now is actually shaping and creating something, whether we are aware and conscious of it or not.
100%.
And I mean, that's something that we could ask ourselves every night when we go to sleep. You know, what was I willing to do today? And in what way will that impact the reality for the future generations tomorrow?
And as a father, I ask myself that every single day. And I'm not sure, are there more days than not that I size up or don't size up? I don't know. but every single day talking about, Dr. Will Coleman and I talked about this too, that, you look behind us to see the future, to my kids. And I don't know what your plans are if you want to, have kids someday, but it's not just the future, it's the now. And how we're shaping our worldview in this moment, and how I do it with my daughter, and how we give life through our words, what we do, how we interact with people. Do we stand up to bigotry and all these things? Do we say something when there's something to be said? It's all powerful stuff.
And that's such a fascinating concept, just to remember that the future isn't just some lightning bolt that suddenly strikes and it's the future. The future is continuously unfolding based upon what is happening in this moment. I
love that. That's great, Jeffon. Absolutely.
Yeah. So moving right along then, I don't have as many slides as I
One other thing I want to say, you mentioned the word generation, and I agree with that, but we probably have, 3 to 4 generations of individuals listening in on this program right now. So it's a now thing. It's a moment thing. It's no matter what your generation, if you're out there listening and you're, 95 years old, if you're 65, 45, 25, 5.
Yeah.
There's a 5-year-old out there. I'm impressed. But, it's what we're doing now. It's the now moment. Yeah.
It's so true. It's baby boomers, the silent generation, as they say, that are over the age of roughly 80 or so, to the baby boomers, to Gen X, to Gen Y, to Gen Z, to the alpha generation who is 10 and younger. I mean, we all are helping to compose what is happening and taking place in this moment. So it is multi-generational, but encompassing of the now, which is we are this. We're it.
We are it. That's it. We're now. Yep.
We're now. Exactly. We're now. All right. So with that, he goes into talk about racism, both as overt and covert, from Kwame Ture and Charles Hamilton. And Kwame Ture was, for those who may know or may not know, Stokely Carmichael. He changed his name, and he was one of the freedom fighters with Dr. King and Malcolm X. But they kind of mention in what he's getting at in this portion of the chapter is this concept of institutional racism, which I really, really enjoyed. Overt, as they mentioned it back in the 60s, was, blatant discrimination, calling people names, terrorist acts, things of that sort. And then covert was more of the institutional side, what happens behind the scenes. But as he goes on, he ultimately says that maybe it isn't covert as we thought. So he asks, in this concept of overt and covert racism, what if the atmosphere of racism has been polluting most white people too? So it's not just racism impacting people of color or Black folks, but what if there is this atmosphere that is also impacting white folks as well? Which makes sense. I mean, whatever is happening in the external environment that we find ourselves in, it's going to impact us to some degree, if we're aware of it. Well, actually, even if we're not aware of it, it's still happening. So framing this concept, and this is the author saying this, obviously, framing the concept of white people versus Black people does not take into account that all white people do not benefit equally from racism, nor are all Black people equally harmed by it. And that was a fascinating point, because it is more than obvious that there are certain people in very high levels of position who benefit off of policies who may be wealthy white individuals. Whereas in Rev Charles, I see you want to share something as well.
Well, no, I'm just hyping you up. That's and I do, but I whenever you're done, yeah.
Okay. We see that. And then, so poor white communities do not receive the same benefit from certain policies that affluent white communities do, nor are all Black people equally harmed by racism, because there are Black individuals who benefit from policies that promote racial inequity.
Yes.
And so he's opening the door to that, which I think is really, really genius.
And it keeps coming back, Jeffon, to policy. Throughout this book, he is consistent in referring in doing his best, I believe, to refer to individuals and policy.
Right.
not groups of people and some abstract something that isn't, the policy and law. That's why it was just hyping that when you said that. He keeps coming back to that. It's policy. And does policy benefit more white people than black people? Yes. But they're also individuals, no matter what color your skin or where you're from or what you look like, that policy benefits them more than others.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I thought that was a really, really great point.
Which actually brings me, Jeffon, back to that whole idea of local government. I started with, and it's election day and local government. I think there's a lot of attention on national government or Senate seats and the president and things like that. But who are our local legislators?
Yeah.
And what do they stand upon?
Exactly.
And what are they up to? And have we really done our research to see what they're committed to? Not just at the high level, a mayoral race,
city council members.
City council members, exactly.
Yeah.
Are we holding them accountable? And I'd love to hear people weigh in on that. What are we doing about that? Local government, where powerful governing happens.
It's in you as an individual or as a group of individuals seem to have more impact in influencing or at least communicating with people at your local level rather than writing the president or the senator a message that you'll probably either get an automatic response or just no response at all. And it's fascinating for me. I know when I lived in Seattle and even in Northern California and Atlanta, I don't know why I didn't vote at all. I didn't vote at all until my wife and I were in North Dakota. And then I started realizing a group of individuals who were very in tune with what was taking place at local levels, which then inspired me to actually have a better understanding of the propositions and the individuals in voting. And then moving here, it's like it stuck with me. And though there's many more propositions here in San Bernardino County and just California in general, doing the research to recognize the policies that these individuals are willing to push forward is imperative in creating this equity that we are aiming to achieve as we move forward as a country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll do a quick PSA. If you haven't voted yet, go, you got all day to vote.
Yeah.
I think if you have until midnight tonight or 8 p.m., I don't know when, just vote.
Just vote.
Just have your voice be heard. It's your personal, it's what you can contribute. It's meaningful. And those, I don't know that any one is more important than the other, but I think we don't talk enough about what's happening at a local level as well.
Yeah.
And again, to Kendi's point, though, it's, what's happening in individuals and closer to home.
Yeah.
That can actually make a difference. So
Voting. Yeah. I encourage, we encourage it.
We encourage it.
Yeah, definitely. So,
and I'm glad, I'm glad you started voting. That's good, man.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know why I didn't.
I
think that there was this underlying belief that my voice actually didn't matter. And then when I would live in a red, when I lived in Georgia, which is predominantly all Republican, I realized I know that how it's going to be. And then when I lived in Northern California, California being predominantly Democrat, I know how it's going to be. And so and same with even Washington, I knew that it was going to lean one way or another and just didn't think my voice mattered. But I didn't even take into account the local level and the propositions and the small measures that are looking to be passed and having an awareness around that, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Word.
Yep.
Right,
Word to that. Okay. So moving right along then. So as he goes to say that it doesn't impact everybody the same, and I'm talking about racism here, we can learn to see racial inequities emerging from racist policies. Remember, racism is a marriage of racist policies and racist ideas to create racial inequities. So it is a merging of those two things. And when we can learn to see that racial inequities actually emerge from these racist policies, we can start recognizing that there is something that we can do to begin to reverse that or at least shift that in a different direction. All forms of racism, as he mentions, are overt. If our anti-racist eyes are open to seeing racist policy in racial inequity. And that was a point that I just kind of want to stamp there. that racism is not something that's at an institutional level that's humming below everything. It is out in the open, but often we don't necessarily see it. But if we recognize the inequality that is created by way of policy, we can recognize some of these, the way that racism is showing up almost everywhere, or any of the isms is showing up, popping up all over the place.
Yep. That's all I got to say to that.
And that's
Yep.
page 220.
That's why I get paid the big bucks, Jeffon. Yep.
Yeah. Well, you know, we lean into those reaffirming yeps from you. All right. I think we have a comment here.
Lovely.
So from an eager guest watching on our website, most people think that they are racist. I believe they are sincere. I believe the motivations that support individuals and institutions who seek every advantage for themselves and the groups they identify with, no matter how others may be denied, exists in humans, including Black people. We are all the same. Some of us make other choices and see life differently. We need to come together and support all in making the choices that lead to, I don't see where it goes.
I can't see the comment.
Oh, okay.
I can't see the comments.
I got it here. Need to come together to support all in making choices that lead to a world that works for everyone. We need to be activists in doing this.
And that goes to your point of doing something. Do something. You know, because he actually, and that was at the last chapter, Jeffon, when he talked about an activist versus a demonstration.
Yep.
You know, like that's when it comes to doing something.
Something.
Yep. Is your life a reflection of, a real reflection of what your belief, you know, what you're up to.
Right. And to that point, an activist, as the author describes it in the prior chapter, is one who has a record of power or policy change. So power or policy change, and we're getting to the power here. And I would agree with the comment that it's not just one group of people. And throughout this book, we've had a conversation about how it is not just one group of people who are continuously oppressing another group of people, but Black folks can be racist, Latinx folks can be racist, Asian folks can be racist, indigenous individuals can be racist. It is a human thing that exists. It's just simply recognizing how we can move forward in anti-racist ways to begin to reverse those policies to promote more racial equity amongst human beings and ultimately shift the culture that we find ourselves in.
And to open our eyes to actually look and see who is making policy.
Yes.
I mean, you can see who's making policy if you look at the demographics of it. Just open your eyes and look, we've got 435 elected officials in the federal government. It's 100 senators. Well, I don't want to, anyway, we need to teach more civics, by the way. We've got a president, a vice president, a House of Representatives, and a Senate. And if you look at the demographic, just look at the demographics. Who's making policy?
Yeah.
And where do they come from? And then look at your local government. What are the demographics of who's making policy? Who's doing it? Policy that then local law enforcement must enforce, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. And think about, if we stand behind this concept of creating a world that works for everybody, it's not just, though it's important how we individually show up, it also has to be policies that reinforce that belief. And I think we all can agree that there are policies that have been passed that are out there that do not create a world that works for everybody. And kind of getting down at that level to begin to do this, not just, okay, let me make sure I show up in a positive, empowered, compassionate, anti-racist way, which is essential and which is something that you can control, but also using that power within you to begin to shift societal norms and or policies that kind of glue the culture together.
Absolutely. Hey, hey, Lori, Reverend Lori, you're producing the show. Would you look up how many federally elected officials do we have? I think it's 400. I want to make sure, since this is, for the record. Would you just?
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm accurate.
I'm not gonna try to guess that.
No, just a quick look up. How many federally elected officials do we have? Do you know, Jace? Oh.
400 something.
Yeah, 435. I think it's 435. Anyway, here we go.
Okay. We'll be back to you with those numbers there.
Exactly.
So I think many of us have probably heard of this topic, institutional racism, and I'll share my screen here. And this is a concept that I kind of parked on and have said many times, and I enjoy the way that it's kind of he breaks it down here. So institutionally racist policies is more concrete than just simply saying institutional racism. The term racist policies is more concrete than institutional racist policies. Policies are institutional in nature, and so therefore I, the author, uses racist policies instead of institutional racism. And that is something that I'm going to take with me as I move forward and, do the work that I do with organizations around diversity and inclusion. And actually, instead of saying this systemic racism or institutional racism, begin to really draw and emphasize that concept of racist policies. And racist policies, again, is creating racial inequity between individuals. There are also homophobic policies.
Right.
There's also sexist policies.
Right.
There is also a variety of these ideas that divide us as people. But bringing emphasis towards the policies at least points us, from my perspective, in a direction that can be shifted or changed.
Policy. Yep.
So with that, he's saying policymakers and policies make societies and institutions, not the other way around.
Yep.
So he then goes on to say the USA is a racist nation because its policymakers and policies have been racist from the beginning. Racism has always been terminal and curable, recognizable and mortal. And I thought that was incredible. And there may be somebody who's, oh, Lori said 537 is the answer.
530. Okay, 537.
537.
435 in the House of Representatives, president, vice president, and 100 senators.
That's that.
Thank you, Reverend Lori. 535, 537. Yep.
So I know in having conversations that with people in that concept, the United States is a racist nation because its policymakers and policies have been racist from the beginning. If that is a challenging thought, if that makes you want to turn off this conversation, if that pushes a button inside that makes you feel like you want to say something, of course, you're welcome to say anything that you would like. But I would challenge you to sit with it and look back in the history of this country and ask yourself, in what ways have racist policies been put out for the people that continue to create this racial inequity? And we see from the beginning, we know because of slavery, we know because of the genocide with the indigenous communities, we know because the ways that Chinese and Japanese were brought here in internment camps and forced to build railroads. We know the way that we see this, and it may not be as blatant. Well, let me take that back. It's there. It's in different ways.
And that comes to the whole conversation of covert and overt.
Exactly.
You know, that if we just open your eyes. I mean, if you're benefiting from it, that's the thing, Jeffon, too. If you're benefiting from it, you don't want to open your eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the folks that are benefiting from it need to open their eyes in order to. It comes back to the principle and the idea, Jeffon, that there is plenty for everybody. There is plenty. There is enough money, enough food. I mean, these are all human, well, not food, but money and the idea that's human created ideas. There's enough food. We grow so much food. There is enough food. There is enough money. There's enough joy. There's enough pleasure. The people that are benefiting the most from racist policies, we have to open our eyes in order to understand, one, there's enough, and two, that means you're still going to have enough.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is plenty. We live in a universe of plenty. Plenty.
Infinite.
Get out of the city someday and go look at the stars and just see how much plenty there is.
Yeah. And I think that it really comes back to just this point of at times having the courage and confidence necessary to confront or challenge the opinions and beliefs that we may have held near and dear to our hearts, particularly when it's around national type of ideas with the America, and recognize that we can have these conversations without saying down with this country or down with America. We can have this country or this message and this conversation and recognize ways that we can make this an even greater community, nation, and be a global citizen with the fellow brothers and sisters who we share this sacred earth with.
That's right.
Forced
Amen
to build,
hallelujah. What's that?
Eager Guest said, forced to build railroads. Not forced. What do you think they should have been doing? Meant to say forced. Okay. Meant to say not forced. Well, okay.
What's that?
That was forced to build railroads when I was talking about the Chinese who were brought here, the Japanese. I know they're in Washington. There are many old areas where they actually had concentration type camps for Japanese who were brought there. And we can say forced to a certain degree, particularly when we start talking about slavery in this country, particularly when we start talking about the indigenous communities in this country. And I would dare to say, particularly when we start talking about Asian cultures who were brought here, maybe promised something and not given what they were told that they would receive. I don't think that is a far-fetched thing to say forced when for many centuries of this country, people were forced, and if not, killed. And when they were killed, their voice was buried, their body was buried, and that's that.
That's the only other option. You do this or we're going to kill you. That's forced. That's it's bullying at its best. And I know I've experienced it in my life. I know I've done it in my life. Well, not, hey, do this or I'm going to kill you. But, there's an intimidation factor that goes along with that. So I don't think forced is an inappropriate word.
Yeah. And I appreciate the comment.
Absolutely.
Please,
that's what we're doing.
Share.
We're just having a conversation.
Yep.
We're just having the conversation. That's what we got to do. We got to be able to talk and mix it up and disagree and still, keep walking arm in arm as human beings.
That's it.
There's dignity in powerful discourse. There's a lack of dignity in just name calling from afar and not taking ownership of our own beliefs and recognizing somebody else, even if we disagree. I mean, there's no dignity in that. It's a dignified discourse, and I love that.
It's important.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
All right, brother, how we doing?
Let's see, how many do we got? So 1, 2, 3, 4 slides left. This next one is a shorter one, so I'll get to that. And this is what you kind of started off at the beginning, and that's a conversation around Trayvon Martin. And I really appreciated the author's story about Trayvon on page, I think it is 223. And he said something that was really fascinating. Let me pull it up. So the black body as a criminal. So often, and we've talked about this in past chapters, but so his father was dating a woman who lived in a gated community in Orlando. Trayvon Martin was walking to the store, got some Skittles and I think a soda pop, was walking back with his hood on. It was somewhat of a rainy day, I believe. He had just been suspended at school for carrying a bag with a trace of marijuana at his Miami high school. Wow, and I thought this was a good comparison. Many white suburban teenage boys partied and drank and drove and smoked and snorted and assaulted to the chorus of "Boys Will Be Boys," but urban black boys face zero tolerance in a police state. Hence the reason, seeing this black body as a criminal triggered this individual, George Zimmerman, in a way to recognize that this black body's presence in this community is a crime. Call the police, told the police there was a series of break-ins, had his 9mm attached to his waist, chased after this boy and killed him. And so there are these racist ideas that are burrowed deep within the mind. And on page 225, he touches upon it. And I'm not going to go into it much because these are concepts and things that we've touched upon in the past. But I want to open it up to you as well, Rev Charles, if you want to share anything about that.
Well, I appreciate how he brought it to life. And I think one of the most potent statements in that few paragraphs there of him describing Trayvon Martin is the black body's presence, comma, a crime. He was coming home from 7-Eleven. That's all he was doing. And what I want to encourage all of us to consider, and it's a difficult exercise, is when have you experienced an injustice having to do with anything? You know, like my mom blamed me and grounded me for a weekend for, taking alcohol out of the alcohol cabinet when I was a kid, and I didn't do it. That's nothing compared to this, what happened with Trayvon Martin. But it was an injustice. You did this when I didn't do it. The black body's presence, comma, a crime.
Yeah.
Is just from a capacity of empathy and compassion. Consider when you have felt an injustice against you, and then multiply that by 1,000. And what's your experience of that? And that it's a helpless, hopeless feeling. Which brings us back to the conversation about policymakers and policy.
Yeah.
And how important that is. That's what I have to say on that.
One of my first experiences of injustice, I mean, when I was younger, there were a few, but when I think I was 18 or 19, and I was driving home from Highline Community College, where I was going to school there in Seattle, or in Renton or Des Moines, and driving home because I worked, so go get changed, got pulled over by an officer on the freeway. He said I changed lanes and was too close to a semi. Ordered me out of the car, handcuffed me on the side of the road, didn't even ask, started looking through my car, said he found some marijuana, gave me a ticket and told me that I could leave. And I didn't, what am I going to say? I didn't know what to say. Yeah. Got in my car, went home. About a week later, I got a letter that said I have to appear in the Burien court. So I went there, and the guy said that I had an exuberant amount of marijuana on me. There was no evidence. I was afraid that if I kept trying to fight it and say no, that they would somehow bring all the books against me. So I ended up just paying this large fine for something that wasn't even true. And in hindsight, I would have went to trial. I would have ordered the evidence to be shown. I wouldn't have let the judge seemingly intimidate me. I wouldn't have let my thought of what the officer was doing intimidate me. And that is something that stuck with me and continuously reinforced that belief that I can't trust many of these officers out here. Yep. Now, I've met some really great ones as well, but I'm just saying that was something that was personal and happened to me when I was, I 18, 19, you think you're grown, but you're actually, you're pretty young.
Not even close. Yeah, not even close. Yeah. But that's the point. Just consider an injustice that you feel like has occurred for you, and inwardly transform that into compassion. Yeah. That's my invitation. Inwardly transform that into empathy in your electing policy makers and your consideration about policy and the type of life that we're living.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I have a handful of, this is probably the most important slide, I think, of this whole book that we've been through. Successive steps that we all can take to be anti-racist. This is kind of the accumulation of everything that we've been talking about. First and foremost, stop using the term "I'm not racist" or "can't be racist" as a defense of denial. Okay? Remember, racism, racist policies, and racist ideas that promote racial inequity. Admit the definition of racist. And when you start thinking of that term racist, think policies. Confess the racist policies that we or you support and the racist ideas that you express. This is something that only you can do for you. I can do this in my perspective and recognize the policies that I support and ask, are they creating racial equity or racial inequality or inequity? Accept the source of these beliefs and these ideas that I express, recognizing that we were brought up in a system or in a society or in a culture that has a bedrock of injustice, has a bedrock of racial tension or racial terrorism that this country has been founded upon. Acknowledge the definition of anti-racist. Again, think policies. So if racism is a marriage of racist ideas and racist policies, then anti-racist is a marriage of anti-racist policies and anti-racist ideas to create racial equity. Display then and promote anti-racist power and policy in the spaces that you find yourself in, and remain anti-racist at the intersection where racism is mixed with other bigotries. And finally, think anti-racist ideas, and this comes from page 226. I mean, I thought that that was a very great summation of things.
He broke it down there. That was, I agree. That's and you know, I think in the last 3 or 4 that he mentioned there, he uses the word struggle, and sometimes it is. You know, again, we're wrestling with it.
Yeah.
But it's an admittance of where we are. You know, in the growth process. You know, I'm like going through puberty. That was a struggle.
Yeah.
You know, I got, you know, zits all over my face, and you know, hormones are flying everywhere, and that's just, you know, I mean, it wasn't the most graceful process, you know, but that's part of growth, right?
Voice cracking everywhere I go.
You know, but that's the general idea. So we have to be willing to grow. The body will grow. We have to commit to the mind growing as well. The body will grow. We have to commit to the mind and the heart expanding as well. And it's okay to see it as a struggle sometimes, as long as we're putting one foot in front of the other one and moving forward. So I think that's great.
So there's a comment, and then I'll go to the second to last slide.
Okay.
Okay, so from an eager guest, what would happen to a mentally unstable but attractive white woman who wandered into certain Black areas of Chicago? I know of such an incident, and the woman was raped and killed. The problem can only be solved when we see that we are all the same. I am reacting to the comments here that make the Black person a special victim. This won't change ignorance.
Well, I don't think the Black person's a special victim. I think, again, let's look at who's making policy and the policy makers and what the policy is.
Yeah.
That's do things happen to people of every race? 100%.
Of course.
100%. I'm not denying what the eager guest said. I agree with you absolutely. But in some respect, we just have to research policy and where it comes from.
Yeah, and
consider
even
that.
Taking it to the step. Okay, so to Black areas of Chicago, what are the policies in those Black areas of Chicago, and how do they differ from the upper suburbs of Chicago or the affluent suburbs? You know, and thinking of the policies that are impacted, I would dare to say that the policies in San Bernardino, right down the road off of Baseline and Waterman, may be a little bit different than the policies that are down there in Palm Desert, which is a very much more affluent community. What are the policies that then are what are the different policies that exist? And of course, there are people of all races, of all shades, of all backgrounds, of all genders, of all sexual orientations who have been impacted by violence.
Absolutely.
But again, we are not saying an individual encompasses the group. There are bad people in all groups of human beings.
Yeah.
And when we recognize we're the same, yes, we can move forward and create something different, but we also have the ability to look back and recognize the foundation that has been laid that we are walking upon in order to change or shift or adapt or transform the future that we are all moving towards.
That's right. An eager guest, I have compassion and feel in my heart for that woman and what happened to her. 100%. And I'm just encouraging everybody, do the research, just look at the history of race. And that's what we're attempting to do here, is stir it up, so that we can all keep investigating and doing the research on how it's unfolded over the course of time. And I believe that's what the author's done successfully in this book. I mean, he's not lacking research. I mean, I just want to show you the notes and index page
is incredible.
It's 244. Just the notes section is 244 to 286.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, you can tell he comes from an academic background.
Yeah. Research. It's not just sitting down in the basement writing a book. He's researched. So
yeah. And by no means is there any special victimization. We're just simply talking about inequities and inequalities that exist in the culture that are perpetuated by way of policies or policy makers who benefit from the inequity that we are all moving through in society.
Just waking up. We're just doing our best to wake up, aren't we, brother? That's
it.
What we're, yep.
So,
all right, you got a couple more?
Yep. This one's a quick one, and then I'll leave with some final takeaways. So he goes on to say, racist ideas fooled me nearly my whole life, and I refuse to allow them to continue to make a fool out of me. And he finishes it up by saying, there's nothing wrong with any of the racial groups and everything wrong with individuals like me, the author, who think there is something wrong with any of the racial groups. And to eager guests, I think that's something that kind of fits what we were all saying, the three of us in that conversation. And it ultimately leads to this greater sense of self-awareness. That's where the change or transformation occurs. And that's from page 227. So before we finish up, I always have a few takeaways.
Are these Jeffon's takeaways?
These are Jeffon's takeaways.
Dun, 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 bum, bum, bum.
And
ladies
now,
and gentlemen, Jeffon's takeaways.
Well, welcome everybody. I want to finish. I want to finish off our time here with some particular things that I know I'm gonna carry with me, and I figured let me just type them out, share them with you, and if you want to embrace one or many of them, please feel free.
Encouraged to. Yep.
Number one, identify the policies and policymakers that you support, and then honestly ask yourself if those policies and policymakers perpetuate racial inequity and inequality. Simple practice, okay? I'm not saying whether yay or nay, just look into that. Number two, commit to healing any of the racist, discriminatory, or prejudicial thought patterns that occur within thyself, within you. That is something that you have the ability to do. You can control what's taking place in here. Number three, I share this one all the time, but I leave it there because it's important. Meditate and reflect on the most challenging concepts from this chapter. And if you are very courageous, you can grab a book like this, open it up, and begin to jot down why that pops up. And write it out instead of just letting it park in your mind and you may or may not ever revisit it. But write down why it's challenging and what you can do to begin to release or relieve that stress or tension that concept causes. Number four, ask yourself every night when you lie down, in what ways did I act anti-racist today? And in what ways did I not act in that fashion? This will give you something that you can carry with you as you move through the rest of the week or the days ahead. And then this last one is an easy one. I mean, simple in nature, but requires true energy and a willingness to do it. And that's make a difference for the better. Create a world that works for everybody. Make sure that what is happening within yourself is reflective of the world that you would like to see as you're walking around. Choose to speak words that lead with compassion and harmony and acceptance and respect. Choose to think thoughts that capture the essence of the being that you have the opportunity to interact with, and catch yourself when maybe you are not making a difference for the better. So those are just a few takeaways that I would like to share with you.
Love it. Love it. Jeffon's takeaways. Sponsored by nobody.
Sponsored by the, yeah. Sponsored by, yeah.
Sponsored by us. Rock and roll. Well, we're about to the top of the hour. Any other comments, Jeffon? I can't see them. Anything else pop up?
Nope. That's it.
Okay, cool. All right. Next week, chapter 18, the last chapter of the book. And then we're going to pivot, and Tuesdays we'll have some other things we'll be sharing with you on Tuesday mornings at 10 o'clock. We're going to keep our daily shows rolling, but after a thorough examination of this book, we're just going to take a little break and see what's next. So
yes,
we got one more week, Jeffon. I appreciate you. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, let's just do this election day, this election cycle. Let's really lean towards the principles that we discuss in Science of Mind and Center for Spiritual Living and New Thought, to recognize the divine order that is everywhere present, even in the apparent absence of divine order. Divine order is there. And let us be willing to reflect inwardly, resolve, heal, work through, dissolve barriers that prevent us from actually encompassing that idea that is oneness.
Yes.
I mean, that's a lot of stuff.
Well, life is a lot of stuff. We'll keep rocking and rolling. Well, I appreciate you, my friend. And we appreciate all of you who continue to support this center financially with your financial goodness. We continue to welcome all of it. You can see there, you can text. You can go to cslpalmdesert.org, and we make it very easy for you to donate there. You can also text in your financial blessing there at the number that Reverend Laurie's put on the screen. And we appreciate all the ways that you continue as we move through this time, all the time, to support our center. We're grateful for you, and grateful for you, all of you that have weighed in, chimed in, made a comment. Thank you so much for participating in our program this morning. We've got chapter 18 next week as we put this book to bed, but not the ideas. We want to keep the ideas rolling. We've moved through the book. We want to keep the ideas at the forefront. So we're going to keep doing that. Donna Peterson Jones, you are welcome. Thank you as well. We appreciate you. All right, my brother, have a magnificent day. Remember, everybody, just hold the highness today. Keep your thoughts high, and know that life is unfolding on purpose, and there's good to be found when you look for it. Rock and roll. All right. Jeffon, my brother, have a great day. Everybody, make today best day ever. Peace and love.
Bye-bye.